When I think about all things, not just creation, but when I think about all things, a verse that really provides me personally with a lot of comfort, a lot of peace, a lot of like internal mercy and grace is one I read the other day, which is Hebrews 11:3. By faith we understand that the entire universe was formed at God's command, that what we now see did not come from anything that can be seen. See, here's the reality of this verse, and it's about creation, but it's about so many other things, so many additional things than just creation. This is about all things. See, when we understand and believe in faith, on faith, by faith, that God created all things, that there is actually a kind, generous, loving God running the show, in charge of this whole thing, regardless of what happens to us, around us. And this isn't sticking our heads in the sand. This isn't giving us permission to not care. It's not doing any of those things. It's not calling us to deny the reality that we currently live in. What it is calling us to is a faith and a hope and a trust in a God who loves us and who is genuinely engaged in our lives, who is pursuing a relationship with us. When we understand that that is the God of the universe who made all things, when we have a proper understanding and framework of who God is, and when we place our faith in him, what we find is we find peace and fulfillment. We can truly understand who we are when we recognize who God is. When we know his character and we understand his behavior, we understand why he made us and how he made us and all of those kinds of things. And then we decide to live out that identity, value, and purpose in our lives. We ultimately find peace and fulfillment. And all we have to do, like I almost said, all we have to do is look out there and look at people who don't know Christ to see how they don't have peace and fulfillment. We don't even have to do that. We can just look into our own lives. When we pursue identity, value, and purpose in things other than God, where that always leads us eventually. Sometimes it's a quicker trip than others, but where that always leads us eventually is a place of lack of peace and a lack of fulfillment. And this is really why. Like when we can honestly evaluate ourselves and honestly evaluate the world that we live in, we see when we do not live according to what God's plan and purpose is, when we do not live out according to God's identity and the value that the identity that God gives us and the value that we find because of that, what we find is chaos, death, and destruction. We talked just about this a little bit the other night in our Tuesday night small group, that when we buy something and we have a question about it, we return to the manufacturer, because the manufacturer is the expert on that particular thing. And if we start playing with that, if we start tweaking it, if we start modifying it, if we start going outside of the manufacturer's specifications, eventually we're going to have a problem. And when we go outside of God as our manufacturer, when we function in ways that are other than the way he designed us to function, we go beyond the parameters of our design, what we ultimately will find is chaos, death, and destruction. And again, sometimes that's a quick trip, sometimes it's a slow trip, but ultimately when we function outside of our design parameters, we find chaos, death, and destruction. And that's not just something that we bring upon ourselves, but it's something that casts a very wide net. This is what we're going to talk about next week, the impact and the effect of sinfulness on the world. Like when we start operating outside of our design parameters, that cascades, sometimes quickly, sometimes slower, but it cascades into every other aspect of our lives. So I want to challenge you. I want to encourage you to live within the identity that God has given you, find your value in Him, and live the purpose that He's given you. And when you do that, you will find peace and fulfillment. And what Hebrews 11:3 is telling us is that when we trust in Him, we will thrive. We'll thrive personally. We'll thrive in our relationships with others. We'll thrive in our relationship with the created order. And ultimately, we will thrive in our relationship with God. That's my hope and my prayer for you today and for this weekend as we get ready to gather together on Sunday and talk about what happens when we don't choose God's design parameters. See you then.